Megalithic Astronomical Alignments of Avalon, presented by Nicholas Mann. In this lecture, Nick discusses the relationship between the primary hills of Glastonbury, the geometry that they display, and their astronomy, first noticed by Alexander Thom. Recorded live at the Megalithomania Conference 2006.
In essence, what I'm going to be describing is the evidence for Glastonbury, the Isle of Avalon, being the centre of a prehistoric astronomical observatory. Now, Alexander Thom was the first person to really mention this, and we'll get into that as we progress. Now, let's see if I can master this. Okay. The key feature of this astronomical observatory is the mound on top of Windmill Hill, or St Edmund's Hill, here in Glastonbury. As you can see, it's not a very prepossessing mound surrounded by a housing estate today, but you can nonetheless see the outlines of it very clearly here. What I'm going to show you is how the mound occupies a pivotal position on the Isle of Avalon and has these solar lines here and here, and these lunar lines passing through it. And what is of special importance is the relationship to the Tor. So by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll understand this diagram. Now, one of the issues about the mound is how old is it? Because some people, especially local people, have said to me, no, that mound is not ancient. That mound is definitely not prehistoric. That mound was built at the time they built the housing estate in the 1960s. So I went to the library, took a look at the maps, and here's the location of the mound on the 1885 map. And the 1885 map doesn't give contours, which would have been wonderful, but this is the location of the mound. And I think we can see that in 1885, there was some very good reason why this footpath made this swerve to avoid going over whatever was there. I'd also like to bring your attention on this map to various stones. More about those later. One other piece of evidence, I was looking for aerial photos taken before the housing estate was built that might show us some more information about the mound, and I found this in Mary Kane's excellent books on the Glastonbury Zodiac. This is an extract from the Aquarian figure, and there is the mound. Once you're looking for it, it jumps out at you on these photographs and maps. The lane footpath comes along here, swerves around the mound and continues on its path over here. Right. The mound itself does fit into the local archaeological sequence. There are many mounds in the area, including this one up on Dundon Hill, which has been excavated and came up with a good date of approximately 1750 BCE, almost 4,000 years old. You can see the comparison between the two mounds. The mound on Windmill Hill is slightly bigger. There are similar mounds up on the Mendips, especially at Priddy. It would seem to fit into this sequence. There's just enough evidence to suggest that the mound was originally much higher, and that what pushed the mound up to 5 meters high, perhaps, or more, has now slumped away and fallen off the side of the mound. And this is borne out by the fact that this area was used for agriculture for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's been ploughed out around the edges. Now, the evidence for astronomy. You stand on the mound, and you look about, and the most conspicuous landmark is the Tor. Very nice view. A few houses in the way. But very nice view. If you stand on the mound at about 8:30 a.m. on the morning of winter solstice, this is what you see. The sun rises at the base of the Tor. So the evidence is that at its most southerly rising point, the sun has tracked southwards across the eastern horizon to this point, its most southerly rising point, and begins to rise. This was helpful because it was quite misty on the last winter solstice. And, of course, one of the problems of being able to observe an event like this is that you can't look at the sun. It's much too bright. And the sun begins to track up the side of the Tor. Now, at this point, the sun is about to leave the cloud and the mist, and this is what happens. You try and take a picture of it, it blurs. But I think you can see from these photos what a good indicator of winter solstice sunrise the Tor is. We have a very nice correlation between the angle of the rising sun and the northern flank of the Tor itself. Now, at this point, I should have showed you a video of this event. Unfortunately, there are some technical problems, and we can't show it to you right now, but I will leave a minute or two at the end of my talk to show you the video. So you're going to all have to hold your horses and wait for a video of this event. Now, this video was taken by a man called Andy Cave, who lived at the time in this house here. And to cut a long story short, he noticed that an extraordinary sunrise was happening the morning of the winter solstice. And he took out his video camera, put a welder's mask over the front of the lens to cut down the glare, and took the video. So you'll have to wait and see the video at the end. Now, Robin Heath very kindly took his theodolite up the mound and came up with these readings. Very good work, Robin. What is interesting is the shift between winter solstice sunrise in approximately 2000 BC, the time I think most likely the mound was constructed to observe this event, and the sun today. What we have, in effect, remember the problem of not being able to look at the sun because it's going to blind you? Well, what the sun does as it rises is that it flashes in the notches created by the terraces. So this would allow very precise observation of the sun without blinding yourself. Now, there's a lot of technical questions here. We don't need to go into them now. If the houses weren't in the way, I think it very likely you would see the sunrise in the notch created by the lowest terrace, then this one, then this one, and then this one. Yeah. Pull it out. Okay. See if that's an improvement. So, could the first step towards working out what the prehistoric people were doing here on the Isle of Avalon? The Tor has been sculpted over a very long period of time. Were they, the people, the terrace builders, were they observing astronomical events? Were the first carvings of the Tor constructed to create precise observation of events like winter solstice sunrise? We don't know until excavations can take place to confirm the theory. This remains a hypothesis. Now, winter solstice, I've made a composite photograph here. If you've got the sun rising, the Tor, you notice that it reaches its zenith over the summit of Chalice Hill, and it sets over the far western end of Windmill Hill. Or actually, because Windmill Hill is below the horizon, it sets down the flank of Allah Hill in the distance. So from the fourth hill, or more precisely, from the mound on the fourth hill of Glastonbury, you observe the sun in a precise relationship to the three other sacred hills of Avalon. Very nice event, I think. You can see I've taken the houses that now obscure this view out of the picture. So this photograph was taken by going into the gardens of those houses and then playing around on Photoshop. So unfortunately, you can't see this sunset today, but I do find it interesting that Allah Hill has always been associated with serpents and dragon lines and the winter solstice sunset, and is meant to be a good ley line running from here to Avalon, and indeed it runs through to Maysbury Castle up in the Mendips. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that in a minute. So we're beginning to build up the evidence for what the ancient people were doing, why they built a mound here, the kind of event they were looking at, the sort of correlation of heavenly and terrestrial phenomena that they were interested in observing. Now, not only that, but we have quite a good western horizon from Glastonbury. From the top of the Tor, Brent Knoll, Steepholm Island in the Bristol Channel, Breen Down, form dominant landmarks. And we find that the summer solstice sunset, 360 degrees round 180 degrees round the horizon from winter solstice sunrise, tracks quite nicely towards Breen Down. It's setting into Breen Down what it would if the Welsh mountains weren't in the way. So this isn't a very good alignment, but nonetheless, you can begin to see that the Tor and the mound on this alignment set up possibilities for summer solstice observation also. However, what is much more precise are the lunar alignments. So we've looked briefly at the summer solstice sunset into Breen Down, the winter solstice sunrise up the northern flank of the Tor. I've mentioned summer solstice sunrise over Maysbury Castle. And now we have a very good lunar alignment. And this alignment, approximately 320 degrees, is the extreme northern position of the moon, the extreme northern moon set, which Alexander Thom called the major standstill. The 180 degrees, extreme southern major moon rise. And this is the alignment that I want us to bring our attention to now. When Alexander Thom came to Glastonbury in the 60s and did a survey, he noticed that from the summit of the Tor through this 320-degree northern major standstill alignment, there were marked on the map several standing stones on the map. He didn't have the time to take this research further. He simply noted this. And he suggested that Glastonbury was a possible megalithic observatory because of these stones on the map. Now, unfortunately, the map reference he gave for those stones turned out to be rather mundane boundary markers. Doesn't work. Thom got that wrong. But what Thom didn't know, and in fact no one in Glastonbury knew, because almost everyone was under the impression that the mound was constructed in the early 60s as part of the housing estate, that the was on this alignment. If only Thom had had a chance to take his theodolite to the mound, he might have found some amazing things. However, that over the top of the Black Mountains of Wales, over the top of the mountains in southern Wales, there is a precise orientation to the Black Mountain. It's about 75 miles away, so you're only going to see it on a clear day. And in fact, I've only seen it once from the top of the Tor. I think the pollution coming from Swansea and southern Wales is so great, it's very difficult to see this mountain anymore. But on a clear day you can see it, and it's a very dramatic pyramidal peak. And it gives a precise foresight for observing this extreme northerly moon set. So Thom was really onto something here. Now, if we extrapolate this line a little further and take it down to the southeast, lo and behold, it runs down to Cadbury Castle. In fact, the distance is as near as you please to 11 miles, which means that if you stand about here to observe the most extreme northern major standstill moon set, you will see it set into the Tor. A very precise alignment. This alignment in local folklore is known as Arthur's hunting path. And Arthur and the wild hunt was said to ride along this line from Cadbury to the Tor every so many years. The records give different numbers for the years, but the suggestion would seem to be that it was every 18.6 years. So right now, this at the time of the major standstill, is the lunar event happening right now, and 18.6 years ago, which incidentally is the harmonic convergence. Here are some times, if any of you want to try and catch this event. Perhaps the most exciting would be an almost full moon, 12 noon, on 7th of December. But it's only 315 degrees. It's not going to reach the Tor, unfortunately. You have missed the event for this year. I think the most northern, correct me if I'm wrong, Robin, are you in the hall? I think the event was a 3/4 moon this April. Thank you, yeah. But there are some pretty good events still to watch. You don't really want to go there while it's dark because, of course, you won't be able to see the Tor. You want the combination of day and moonset. But it should be a very nice event. Now, as you know, the sun moves through the heavens along a line, imaginary line we call the ecliptic, that's tilted 23 degrees. The Earth is tilted 23 degrees to this. So there's 1 year around the sun, we get the seasons. But the moon is tilted to the ecliptic. Now what you need to do here is watch the moon. See, the moon is going through its 29-day cycle. It's waning, now it's full, now it's waning, now it's waxing, now it's waning, now it's waxing. Get the idea? So that's one 29-day cycle. Now, in that 29-day cycle, it's also going up and down across the ecliptic with the stars beyond it. And Thom charted this on this diagram. So here we have the ecliptic. Here we have a 1 month, 1 moon passage. And you can see that over an 18.61 year cycle, the moon reaches its most northerly and most southerly extremes on either side of the ecliptic. So 9.3 years from this point, it will be at its least extreme. So we're at this point now, where the moon is making its most extreme swings in the heavens. Very useful diagram. Now, Thom also pointed out that the reason for this is because this is a geocentric view of the heavens. We're here at the middle. Here's the ecliptic with the sun going round the Earth, taking 1 year to do it. And here's the moon. There's the moon's orbit, does that in 1 month. But it's tilted to the ecliptic. And where it crosses the ecliptic are called the nodes. So these are the nodes. And those line of nodes are progressing backwards. 18.6 years it takes for the line of nodes to come back to the same place. Now, the value of this diagram is that it shows that if the moon is at this point in relationship to the sun, you're going to get an eclipse. The moon is going to cover the sun in relationship to the Earth. If it's in this range, then you're going to get a partial eclipse. If it's at this point, shown in the diagram, then the moon's orbit and the ecliptic don't correspond, and an eclipse isn't likely to happen. Once you understand these cycles, you're in a position to know exactly the relationship of the orbit of the moon to the sun, and you can predict eclipses precisely. But you need the kind of observatory that somewhere like the Mound gives you, where you can have an excellent horizon. This is close to northern major moonrise. It's actually right over Maysbury Castle, Iron Age hill fort. You need the kind of detail that perhaps a line of posts down the back of the tour would give you. Now, today, the back of the tour has these notches in it. And I'm, again, like these notches on the northern flank, I would like to suggest that these notches are man-made to track the most southerly major moonrise from the mound. Posts, there's a bloody great post up there at the moment, isn't there? Down there would give you that kind of precision. Now, some nice, kind person on the internet has given us this chart that gives you another view of this event. This blue line would show the moon reaching its most extreme position if it didn't do this wobble across the ecliptic. So you can see the moon is going up and down like this. And so you can see that, in fact, there were two peaks this year. One, here we are, in March, April time, and there'll be another one in August, September time. And then after this, it will start tracking back down again. Notice that these events tend to pick up on first quarter and last quarter moons. Full moons tend to be, they're not at the most extreme points in the cycle, for reasons I'm not going to go into here. Shown you these. So, southern major moonrise, back of the tour, zenith over Chalice Hill, moonset into in fact, it's into the Holy Thorn. Echoes of Callanish up in the Hebrides, where I think loads of people will be going this July to observe, where the moon will be even lower in the sky and track its movement through the sky over a range of mountains. We have our own right here in Glastonbury. The three sacred hills of Avalon frame this event very nicely, and I think the builders of the mound knew this and were watching this. Now, as is well known, Stonehenge is oriented to summer solstice sunrise, winter solstice sunset on its main axis. But the four station stones, four primary stones on the site, appear to have an orientation to the major standstill of the moon. And it has been pointed out that at this latitude, these lines cross at approximately 90 degrees. They wouldn't do that much further south or much further north. So, a nice bit of terrestrial, celestial geometry begins to emerge. Now, here in Glastonbury, we find that this major standstill line could be taken to be crossed by the major Glastonbury alignment, the St. Michael line, or the May Day line. Well researched, as other speakers at this conference have mentioned, aligned to approximately Samhain, Imbolc sunset, and Beltane and Lunasa sunrise. Wonderful event. Boroughbridge Mump, May Day, sunrises over the Tor. What could be better? Cadbury Castle, December, full moon set, well over the Isle of Avalon. Very nice alignment. 11 miles between Glastonbury Tor and Cadbury Castle, 11 miles between Glastonbury Tor and Boroughbridge Mump, 11 miles to the tip of Hampden Hill. A perfect rhombus in the landscape. Hampden Hill, if you're not aware of it, a fantastic site, fantastic place to visit. Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age. Caesar mentioned it as one of the Oppiders of Britain. The Fosse Way is aligned to it. And what's interesting about this diamond is that if you divide this into 4 parts and this into 3, this divides into 3, so you get a 3 to 4 relationship, which takes us into 7-fold geometry. So it's very easy to create from this rhombus, this diamond, which Graham Hancock described as an entopic shape yesterday. Was that the word for it? And Edmund, I think, mentioned as the shape of the lozenges that the prehistoric people were using to look at these kinds of astronomical correlations, creates 7-fold geometry. And Michael this morning mentioned how 7-fold geometry takes us into the realm of spirit. I think he mentioned that 11, and we have 11 miles here, is also one of the key numbers, the prime numbers for the spiritual dimension. So it would seem that one of the primary characteristics of this particular landscape temple that's peculiarly Avalonian is to have this spiritual dimension associated with it. You can break down the 7-fold geometry of this figure in yet another way, and the St. Michael line, the major standstill line, and it generates a double 7-pointed star with, some correlations to some quite nice points around its perimeter. In the United States, other people who were very interested in observing the extreme lunar positions were the people, the Illini people who lived in what is now Illinois, Ohio, a long-standing civilization, the Mound civilization. In fact, all the early North American civilizations were mound building, a long tradition of observing these events. This particular mound, the Octagon Mound, archaeoastronomers are now convinced that this 8-sided figure is aligned to all those major and minor standstill positions of the moon. The main event being observed from this viewing platform here to the northern major moon rise. This is getting such interest in the United States that they're preparing for about 10,000 people to come and watch this event. It's huge. We've got the same thing going on here in our own country. Huge earthworks, these, on a massive scale. But of course, I think what is unique to Britain is that in relationship to the Western world, that we're positioned in the north. We are under the pole star. Here's a time lag photo of the pole star. And further north you go, the more under the influence of these northern energies, I think, we become. Of course, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, points to the pole star. And our great folk hero, Arthur, is named also after the bear. And I think this is a very rich symbolism that needs to be explored. That here in this country, we're looking to a particular set of astronomical patterns with particular attunements to particular celestial energies. Now, of course, the way these patterns manifest on Earth, many speakers of this conference have elucidated. We have the marvelous Platonic solids, the square, the circle, the dodecahedron, and the golden section ratios. And all these manifest in the patterns of Earth. They inform us, or at least they informed the ancient world in how to lay out their sacred sites, how to design their cities, how to build in harmony with the heavens. Recent work I've done on the golden section shows that this is the template for Washington, D.C. The architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant in 1791 used this template to lay out the original design for the city. And this is current work that is coming out in a book that will be published in August. The point is that through observation, we learn how to come into harmony with the heavens. We learn how to align ourselves with the heavens. We learn how to align ourselves with the divine principles. Now, in ancient Egypt, the divine principles were known as the netta, which is translated as the gods and the goddesses. But that would be a fallacy. That would be to anthropomorphize, would be to make the universe in the image of man. The point is that we are made in the image of the universe. And here is one of the nettas, the netta known as Sekhmet, in the temple of Ptah at Karnak. And this isn't an anthropomorphization of a divine principle. This is one of the manifestations of the divine principles on earth. In the Celtic tradition, you have the figures of sovereignty personified by a woman, a maiden, in this case emerging from the primal mound itself. What's happened in our culture of scientism is that we have reified the idea that there is an observer inside our heads. That we look out at the world and there's an image imprinted by our eyes on the back of our brain that we see. Nonsense. With this view, called the Cartesian theatre, the universe is made in the image of man. It's not so. DNA does not make consciousness. Consciousness makes the DNA. See the difference? The brain isn't made so we can think. Thinking makes the brain. Time and space are not made so energy can exist. Energy creates time and space. The eye is not made so we can see. Light exists in the universe and matter responds by creating an organ receptive to light. Light makes the eye. And this wonderful quote from Schwaller de Lubitz: the ear is not made for hearing. How can it be said that the riverbed is made for the river? Sound has made the ear. So, at places like Glastonbury, the primal mound, with all its alignments to the heavens, its primary vertical axes, its axes to the sun, to the moon, to the geometric patterns of the universe, we find that when we study these forms, we know energy. If we know energy, we understand space. If we understand space, then we understand the root. If we know the temple of the earth, the temple of our body, we can know the temple of the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is what our ancestors were doing here. I think through our own practices of life, we have no choice but to put ourselves back into those positions that those people occupied as observers of these incredible universal events, so that once again we live in accordance with the divine harmony. Thank you very much.
This has been a Megalithomania audio production. For more information, visit megalithomania.co.uk.